Bienvenidos! Today we're going to talk about affirmative and negative words in Spanish. Affirmative and negative words are indefinite words that describe something that exists or doesn't exist, and I have a list of examples of some of these words. We have something or all in English, and in Spanish that would be algo, todo, or todos. So something is algo, all is todo or todos. Now, for the affirmative indefinite word, we also have a negative indefinite word. So the negative for something and all is nothing. And in Spanish, that would be nada. Nada means nothing. And the way we use these in sentences is a little bit different than in English. Similar in the affirmative, but more different in the negative. Quiero algo means I want something. Quiero todo means I want it all. Now, if the it is plural, it would be quiero todos. I want them all. So we have quiero algo, quiero todos, or quiero todo, and quiero todos. Now, on the negative side, if we want to say I don't want anything, in Spanish we would, because we're in the negative, everything in the sentence has to be negative. So we would not use algo for anything. Instead, we would use nothing. No quiero nada. Now, our English training is going to make us feel like this is incorrect because we're taught that it's grammatically wrong to say, I don't want nothing. But in Spanish, that's actually grammatically correct. So we have to be ready to change our way of thinking when we're using these indefinite negative words in Spanish, because we have to say, I don't want nothing. Algo pasa, something's happening. Todo pasa, everything's happening. No pasa nada, nothing is not happening. Nada pasa, nothing's happening. And notice that there are two different ways to say nothing's happening. We can say it's nothing is not happening, or just nothing's happening. No pasa nada or nada pasa. Now let's look at the next set of indefinite words. Sometimes and always. In English, sometimes and always mean something indefinite. A veces, sometimes. Siempre, always. And then the negative indefinite words are nunca and jamas. Both of these words mean never. So the opposite of sometimes would be never. The opposite of always would be never. Now let's look at some examples. Let's see here. Lisa a veces estudia. Sometimes Lisa studies. In this case, we'd say Lisa sometimes studies. Lisa estudia siempre. Lisa always studies. Lisa studies always. Here we're doing. Okay. Lisa nunca estudia. Lisa never studies. Lisa no estudia jamás. Lisa does not never study. This is the correct way to say it in Spanish. So we can use a veces in the same spot as we use siempre here. We could say Lisa estudia a veces. Or we could put siempre up here. We could say Lisa siempre estudia. And the same thing down here with nunca and jamás. We could say Lisa jamás estudia, or we could say Lisa no estudia nunca. And here's an example of a question. ¿Siempre estudia Lisa? Does Lisa always study? No estudia. Lisa nunca. Lisa does not never study. Oh, this is a question. No estudia Lisa nunca? Does Lisa never study? Okay, so let's look at our next example. Someone is alguien. Everyone is todos. So these are referring to people. And then the opposite would be ninguno, no one, and nadie, nobody. Now, we have to pay attention with ninguno because ninguno agrees in gender and number when it's modifying a noun or when it's standing for a noun. José escribe a alguien. José writes to someone. José escribe a todos. José writes to everyone. Alguien escribe. Somebody writes. Todos escriben. Everybody writes. And then our negative would be José no escribe a nadie. José doesn't write to nobody. Now remember, in Spanish, when we have a negative sentence, everything has to be negative. So we wouldn't use a positive in a negative sentence because we have no. That makes this negative. So everything, all the indefinite words have to match the negative no. So we have to use nadie. Nadie escribe, nobody writes. Now, we could use ninguno, no one, instead of nadie here. The thing we need to keep in mind with ninguno is it agrees in gender and number with the noun it's standing for, or the noun it's describing. And I have some other examples we're going to look at in a few minutes that highlights this a little bit better. But just keep in mind that we could put ninguno here, and if we were talking about something generic, unknown, then we would use ninguno. If it was plural, ningunos, ninguna or ningunas. I have some more examples we're going to look at in a few minutes. So let's look at our next indefinite word on the list. Either or. In Spanish that would be o. Now o also means or, but in this case when it's used two times like this it's either or. And then the negative is ni, neither nor. So let's look at some examples. O ella trabaja o ella duerme. So here we have our two O's. Or she's working or she's sleeping. Okay? Ella trabaja o duerme. Ella works or sleeps. So here's the O used as or, and here it is used as the either or. Now, ella ni trabaja ni duerme. This is our negative. She neither works nor sleeps. Ella trae libros o papel. She brings books or paper. Ella no trae ni libros ni papel. She doesn't bring neither books nor paper. So because this has a no in it right here, this makes it a negative sentence. So we have to use the negative neither nor, the ni and the ni. Because whenever we have a negative sentence, we have to use negative indefinite words. So let's look at our next example. For but, we have pero. This is the but that means except. Pero. And sino means not but. Now, there's really not an exact translation for sino, but I'll give you an example of when we use pero and when we use sino. La mujer es vieja, pero inteligente. The woman is old, but intelligent. So here we have a situation where we have two conditions that are coexisting. We have the condition of being old coexisting with the condition of being intelligent. Sino is where we have two conditions and they are opposites or opposing one another, and only one of the conditions exists. La mujer no es tonta, sino inteligente. La mujer no es tonta, sino inteligente. So we have, in English we would use but here, but in Spanish we would say the woman is not silly, she is intelligent, or she's not unintelligent, she's not stupid, she is intelligent. So we have one condition existing and not the other condition. Okay, so this is the first condition is the condition that does not exist, it's a negative. Okay, we have no. She's not this, but she's this. Okay, so that's why it's not but, because we have a negative and then the condition that's existing. Whereas when we use pero, we have this condition existing, old, and the intelligent existing. Now let's look at our next example. For also and tú, this is not tú in Spanish, it's tú, like also. We have tambien, and tampoco means either or neither. So let's look at some examples. Magda asiste y Jorge viene también. So Martha's attending and Jorge is coming also. Marta no asiste y Jorge tampoco viene. Martha's not attending and Jorge is not coming either. So this either is not a choice, it's the negative of also. It's kind of the neither. So Martha's not attending and Jorge is not coming either. In English we would say either, but in Spanish it's not coming neither. Marta no asiste y Jorge no viene tampoco. So we have Martha's not attending and Jorge is not coming neither. So you can see that both of these are negative sentences and the tampoco can come before viene or after viene. Let's look at the next example. Some or any. Alguno. Now, alguno is like ninguno. It can agree in gender and number with the noun it's describing or the noun it's standing for. And we have ninguno again, which means none or not any in this case. Ninguno up here means no one. Ninguno down here means none or not any. Let's take a look. Alguna persona camina. Some person walks. Alguna camina. Again, some walks. In Spanish we can say that. In English we would never say some walks. But alguna is standing for person. So maybe we're in a conversation with somebody and we know we're talking about a person. We're using alguna because persona is feminine. So it's agreeing in gender with the noun it's standing for. Ellas visitaron alguna ciudad. They visited some city. Ellas visitaron alguna. Again, we can substitute alguna for ciudad. And it still agrees in gender with the noun it's standing for. Visité a algún amigo. Okay, I visited a friend. Some friend. Now, algún here is before a masculine noun, amigo. And notice that it behaves just like other words that end in uno. The uno becomes un before a masculine singular noun. So alguno becomes algún, and we have to add an accent mark and drop the O before a masculine singular noun. If the noun is not following this, then it just becomes alguno. Visité a alguno. Okay, I visited a friend. But in English we can't really say that. It's not a direct translation. But we can use this to stand for algún amigo. We can just say alguno. But it's still masculine singular. We just, because the noun isn't following it, we maintain that O on the end. Notice also that when alguno or algún stands for a person, we use the personal a when it's direct object. Okay. Él no ve ningunos carros. He doesn't see any cars. Now in English we would say he doesn't see any cars, but in Spanish we would say he doesn't see not any cars. It's a negative sentence, so we have to use the negative indefinite word ningunos. And notice that ningunos is now masculine plural because carros is masculine plural. Okay. Él no ve ningunos. Again, ningunos can stand for carros because we're talking about carros. Maybe we're in a conversation. It still agrees in gender and number with carros. No visité a ningunas amigas. Here we have an example of plural feminine ningunas. Again, we're using the personal a. No visité a ningunas. I didn't visit any. Ningún hombre trabaja. No, not one man works. Again, it's before a masculine singular noun, so it becomes ningún instead of ninguno. No trabaja ninguno. No one works. No trabaja ningún hombre. Not one man works. Alright, let's look at a few other examples. If we wanted to use more than one indefinite word in a sentence, we need to know that in Spanish, that either all the words are negative or all positive in a sentence. So if we have a negative sentence with one negative word, all the other indefinite words have to be negative too. Ellos nunca quieren nada. So they never want nothing. Ellos no quieren nada nunca. It's okay to say it this way too. They don't want nothing never. There's our negative, and there are two indefinite words. No veo a nadie nunca. I don't see no one never. Nunca veo a nadie. I never see nobody. El niño no se baña nunca. I wanted to give you some other types of verbs. Here's a reflexive verb. I just wanted you to see what these words look like when they're with a reflexive verb. So we have el niño, and then no. Here's our negative. Se baña nunca. We could put the nunca here. El niño nunca se baña. We could say el niño nunca se baña or el niño no se baña nunca. Ninguno se baña. Alguno se está bañando. Some are bathing. No van a llorar nunca. They're never going to cry. Or we could say nunca van a llorar. Siempre voy a vivir en Ohio. I'm always going to live in Ohio. Or we could say, voy a vivir en Ohio siempre. These verbs that have more than one verb in the verb phrase, when we were looking at the other examples on the other board and in other sentences, treat this as one whole verb. So don't separate pieces of it. And again, don't separate the reflexive pronoun from the verb. Just treat these as a whole and don't put any of these negative words in between here. Just keep these as a whole verb phrase together. ¿No ves tú ningún libro? Do you not see no books? That's kind of how we would say it in Spanish. ¿No ves ninguno? Do you not see none? Do you not see any? ¿Por qué no visitas nunca a tus padres? Why don't you never visit your parents?